We are 2 years into the Deshaun Watson experiment, and the results have not been encouraging thus far, especially when you consider how much the Browns have invested in terms of draft capital and financially. To be fair, he was hurt much of the 2023 season, but when will the Browns start seeing some return on their investment? Let's go ahead and discuss. And what's crack-a-lack? It's your boy Broshmo, just in case you did not know, so we're back again once again for another deep dive, as we're going to be taking a look at the Cleveland Browns and project how they're going to do in the 2024 season. But before we get to the future, we got to talk about the past. We got to talk about 2023. The Browns opened the season with a victory over the division rival Cincinnati Bengals in a rain game, so it was hard to come away with any indicator of how things were progressing with Deshaun Watson. However, in week 2 versus the Steelers, the Browns would lose Nick Chubb for the rest of the season to a gruesome knee injury, and this was only a week after losing right tackle Jack Conklin for the rest of the season to an ACL injury. Injuries would be a constant issue for the Browns during the season. As a matter of fact, they would lose Deshaun Watson to a shoulder injury, and rookie Dorian Thompson-Robinson would get his first career start against the Baltimore Ravens, and, well, let's just say it was a rough outing. They would end up losing the game 28-3. The Browns were 2-2 heading into their bye, and now PJ Walker would get the start in a victory over the previously undefeated 49ers. Walker didn't really look good in the game, but the defense certainly did, as they would for most of the season. Deshaun Watson would return against the Colts in week 7, but leave the game with a concussion. He would return again in week 9 against the Cardinals, but eventually he would be shut down for the remainder of the season, and that happened in week 10 in a victory over the Ravens. DTR started the next 2 games, but he soon went down with an injury as well, and that's when the Browns decided to sign Joe Flacco off of the streets. He would lose his first start of the season against the Rams, but then he went on a tear, and the Browns went on a 4-game winning streak, allowing them to lock up the 5th seed in the AFC. They finished the season 11-6 and headed to Houston in the wildcard round, where the Joe Flacco comeback story came to a fiery end at the hands of the Texans, as the Texans won 45-14. The defense was great for much of the season, as they were 12th against the run, 1st against the pass, and 13th in points allowed. However, the aggressive nature of the defense was exposed in the wildcard loss to the Texans. As for the offense, it was hard to get a read of things since they were hurt for so much of the season. And I'm not just talking about like Nick Chubb and injuries at quarterback, but the offensive line was pretty banged up for most of the year. Real quick, I gotta give a shout out to today's sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. I absolutely love Underdog Fantasy because I love football, and now that the football season is far and away, it doesn't mean my betting season has to be, because they do all kinds of sports, whether it's baseball, basketball, esports even. They got you covered, whether that's weekly best ball or my favorite, higher lower on player props. So if you sign up at Underdog Fantasy using promo code BROSHMO, then they will give you a first-time deposit up to $250. That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. So if you're gonna go and bet with Underdog Fantasy, use promo code BROSHMO. Take advantage of this offer, but please bet responsibly and bet within your means. The Browns hardly lost much of anything during the offseason, as most of the guys that left were rotation players. Probably their biggest hits were like Joe Flacco. You had linebacker Sione Takitaki. You also had tight end Harrison Bryant. But let's talk about some of the additions that they made this offseason. With Joe Flacco now gone, they probably want to solidify that backup quarterback position, especially considering how many injuries they had last year. And I thought they did a good job. They went out, they got Jameis Winston, who I think is one of the better backups in the NFL. You know, if he's going to have to come into the game, he brings that gusto, that pizzazz. He'll bring some sort of spark to the offense. He's not afraid to take shots. That was kind of the big thing with Joe Flacco, as, yeah, you had to deal with the valleys, but he gave you a lot of peaks. Came in, and it felt like Flacco was playing a turkey bowl, right? That Thanksgiving day, just, I'm coming off the couch and I'm just going to sling this ball around. And I feel like Winston's kind of similar in that manner. They also brought in Tyler Huntley, so you could say he could actively compete for that backup quarterback role, but you know you're going to get a very good emergency quarterback QB3. DTR is still around. So I like that addition. Probably their biggest addition was trading for Jerry Jeudy, who, like, if you look at his analytics, man, he's a really solid receiver in terms of like yards per route run, and just his ability to create separation. But he's really only thrived the most part in the slot, which that's what he's gonna do when he comes here. That's why they went out, they got him, and then they chose to give him a good extension. So Jerry Jeudy, probably the big haul this offseason. But let's look at some of the others, because they had some minor ones that are going to be like rotation players, or going to be decent backups for the position. For instance, Jordan Hicks is actually going to be a starter. This team did lose Anthony Walker and Sione Takitaki. Anthony Walker, unfortunately, has been just not healthy the last couple of years, because when on the field, he's pretty darn good. I'm actually really happy my Dolphins picked him up. But Takitaki leaving, it's kind of a big hit. You get a good, reliable veteran in Jordan Hicks. So I thought that was a really good deal. He's going to be playing there along JOK. So there's that. Let's get to these rotation players. For instance, you have, we got Hurst. We got Dante Foreman. They also added Nyheim Hines to that backfield. So it's not just Jerome Ford. So for the most part, they're probably, because again, we don't know the timetable with Nick Chubb. So they're probably going to just ride the hot hand, and they're kind of hoping Jerome Ford can be that guy. And I truthfully believe Jerome Ford can be that guy, because I was a big fan of his when he was coming out of Cincinnati. Keep in mind, this was a dude that was recruited by Alabama. He's got really good launch speed. So I like that. Nyheim Hines gives you some special teams return ability. So I thought he was a solid addition as well. Speaking of the devil, there's Nyheim Hines. But they also brought in Quentin Jefferson. They did just lose. They lost Jordan Elliott during the offseason to the Niners. So they like having a very deep rotation when it comes to that defensive interior. So Quentin Jefferson, Shelby Harris. There's a few other guys they did just draft. Mike Hall, which we'll talk about him when we get to their draft picks. So the defensive line is still looking like it's going to be a big strength of this team. In general, the defense is a big strength. Like, their secondary is really good as well. So like the defense is a big strength. They're going to be able to keep this team in ball games. They just are. That's kind of wild they brought Cade York back. Neither here nor there. He's a kicker. I ain't going to talk about him. We got McLeod coming back. They brought in Adenji, who probably should be a guard in the NFL, but he's been depth at tackle for teams most years. Devin Bush also coming into that linebacker core. So you get someone who can be a really good blitzer, though with Jim Schwartz, you're not really going to be dealing with a lot of blitzers. And I mean, you get a really good athlete. Like Devin Bush is kind of like, since he's left, even during his time in Pittsburgh, it's kind of feel like he's more of this depth player for teams. And they brought in a couple of receivers. Here we go. Giovanni. I don't really even know how to say that last name, but for the most part, this cat, Giovanni, he's a blocking tight end. I feel like Jordan Atkins is going to step up and be that other receiving tight end next to David Njoku. So for a team that typically runs a decent amount of 12 personnel, they like to run the football. Though they have committed a bit more to like 4 wide receiver sets and such. I say 4 wide receiver sets, but they're kicking Njoku out there in the slot, but they're not afraid to go like empty backfield. They're not like the offense has changed a little bit now that Deshaun Watson is coming to town. It's not what it was at the beginning when Stefanski first arrived. Like this wide zone Gary Kubiak type of offensive scheme has definitely changed over the last few years, has evolved, so to speak. But I guess let's go ahead and talk about what they brought in via the NFL draft. So because of the Deshaun Watson trade, the Browns didn't have a first-round pick in 2024. That'll change next season in 2025. But as far as the 2024 class, they were limited with what they could do. Regardless, I thought they did a solid job with just the draft capital that they had. Starting in the second round with Mike Hall Jr., defensive interior out of Ohio State. He had the second highest pass rush win rate among any of the defensive interior players in that class. Kind of the biggest knock on him was, okay, he was listed at 280. You could kind of notice the play strength isn't exactly ideal yet, but then showed up to the pro day at 299. And honestly, the best part of this is you're not going to have to rush him. Like, you're not going to have, like, the Browns aren't going to have to worry about him producing right away because of the sheer amount of depth they have on that defensive interior with, like, Dalvin Tomlinson, Shelby Harris, you got Maurice Hurst, they added Quentin Jefferson. So you're not gonna expect him to produce right away, and you could take your time and develop him. And then in the third round, they took Zach Zentner, guard out of Michigan. He did end up like breaking his tibia and fibia prior to the end of the season, so he didn't really test out, but he's put on a lot of good tape, not just last year, but the year before. So you kind of feel good about him as potentially a future option after like Joe Bitonio, who's 32. Even Wyatt Teller, man, he's at 29 going on 30. So looking at maybe potential replacements for the future, or maybe to get cheaper at guard in the future. I think that's great. So another guy you bring in and can develop. And then at that point, we go to day 3, and I think they did a solid job. They went out, got Jamari Thrash, basically this guy that could win vertically, not necessarily like a blazer, but pretty darn good speed. He ended up testing at 4.46. Real solid there. 12 forced missed tackles last season for Louisville. So someone who can maybe even help produce in the return game. And then they also snagged in the 6th round Nathaniel Watson, linebacker out of Mississippi State. Kind of feels like an early 2-down linebacker who's got a good sideline to sideline mobility. He kind of just has that thumper in him. So someone that you're kind of maybe hoping after like Jordan Hicks, he's on a 2-year deal. Maybe that Nathaniel Watson could be that guy, or they got Muhammad Diabates, former like Utah/Florida linebacker. Hoping maybe one of those guys can step up now that they lost guys like Taki and Anthony Walker. And then they ended the draft with 2 7th-round picks. One being Miles Harden out of South Dakota. Someone who you look at the tape, it's like, yeah, he's crushing lesser competition, but he goes to the Shrine and looks like he belongs. Someone who has got, I think, slot and outside corner ability. Again, corner, it's going to be a position you might be getting expensive at. You want to pay, are you going to be able to pay like a Greg Newsome or a MJ Emerson, which I imagine Emerson's going to be the guy, but we'll see with Newsome. I'm sure they're going to figure out a way to try to keep all those guys together. But again, 7th round, you're not expecting these guys to replace current starters. You're kind of just taking shots and hoping these guys can play special teams. Then Juwan Briggs, bit of a bowling ball type of size, but golly, he's got good strength there for Cincinnati. But again, he's probably gonna be a practice squad type of player just because of the sheer amount of depth on the defensive line for the Browns. But like, oh no, man, these were all players I really liked. They got them at good values. I thought it was a good draft class. So let's go ahead. Let's talk about this coaching staff because they do have one big change. That change is Ken Dorsey now being the offensive coordinator for the Cleveland Browns. Alex Van Pelt, the former OC here in Cleveland, he decided to take the same job, though now in New England. But Ken Dorsey, he was formerly the Bills OC. Outside of that, he's been like a quarterback coach there in Buffalo, also in Carolina. He's a former quarterback. Go Hurricanes. That's right. To you, baby, to you. The last time we were really national championship relevant, he was the quarterback. But really, I think he's here to kind of like, okay, let me learn, and next time I get a crack at being maybe like the true play caller, that I could really like hit it out of the park, man. Didn't go well in Buffalo for me. Maybe I was a little bit too RPO heavy. I'm going to sit under now the Kevin Stefanski learning tree. So let's talk about Stefanski's offense, because since he's arrived here in 2020, he's done a phenomenal job with this offense. He was formerly the OC of the Minnesota Vikings. Then during that time, the offensive advisor for the Vikings was Gary Kubiak. So it wasn't surprising that when he first showed up in Cleveland, Stefanski that is, that you saw a lot of just that rub, that wide zone with just that Kubiak type of influence, whether it was with the play action, the personnel, the concepts on the short to intermediate. But since then, he's really kind of made this scheme his own with innovations here and there, especially since adding Deshaun Watson, because that was kind of the thing. It's like, okay, Watson, good in shotgun. We're going to incorporate a lot more shotgun and our play action. A bit more of it's going to come out of shotgun. We saw a bit more like 3 wide receiver sets. Like this was a team that was typically, running that 12 and it's sometimes 13 personnel. And not to say that they don't pull that out anymore, but we definitely saw a lot more 3 wide receiver sets. Pin and pull's kind of always been a big part of the blocking concepts here. If you're not familiar with pin and pull, it's basically where you just get like 2 offensive linemen moving out in space. One will kind of like seal the inside while the other is kind of looking at the second level for someone to just mollywop. That's the textbook definition, I suppose. But man, he's a great corner. That's why he's a great offensive mind. That's why I got really high grades for him. A+ when it comes to the running offense. B+ when it comes to the passing offense, just because we have seen little bits and pieces and him kind of making the scheme his own, at least tailoring the scheme, at least for Deshaun Watson. At defensive coordinator, you got Jim Schwartz, who replaced Joe Woods last year, and it was a phenomenal replacement as he turned this defense into one of the most feared defenses in the NFL. Schwartz is a guy with a ton of experience. He was a DC for the Eagles, the Bills. You go back to 2008, where he was a DC for the Titans. He had a stint as the Lions head coach. So a guy with a good amount of experience, but he's a great defensive mind as well. Saying of his, when it comes to the defensive line, he's like, hey, I don't want those dump trucks. Give me some Ferraris. I want my defensive line to go boom, boom real fast. Which, I mean, when you have Myles Garrett as Darius Smith, they do go boom, boom. And I imagine like the drafted of Mike Hall Jr. Probably was a Schwartz call. Like, hey, give me that guy. He goes fast, and not just fast. Good contact balance, just bouncing between blockers. I like it. Give me some of that. But big reason he does that is because he doesn't blitz a ton. He doesn't. He really relies on his front 4 to go and get that pressure. You're going to see like a wide 9 alignment because he just wants to like crash down, have those guys have ideal like angles and straight shots to the quarterback. But that does enable itself to leave gaping holes in the run game, which is why I'm a little lower on his run defense. That's why I got a C+ grade there. Though last year they had the 12th best run defense per EPA. So, hey, but I do feel like you put a lot, like in the run game, you put a lot of responsibility on those linebackers to be able to come up and make plays. There's a lot of responsibility on the interior players because then they're probably being asked to double gap, which basically means they're typically going to line up in the face of an offensive lineman, and they're going to have to take care of the gap on both sides. So it's just a lot more responsibilities when it comes to the run game. But what he does coverage-wise, we're typically going to see a lot of man coverage, and that works A-okay, man. You got a really good cornerback room there with Denzel Ward, Martin Emerson, Greg Newsome. But let's go ahead. Let's talk about some of these other coaches on the staff, or at least some of the guys that caught my eye or I was able to recognize. You got Bill Musgrave, someone who has been a offensive coordinator, a QB's coach in the NFL for a long time. You got Tommy Rees, who remembers him throwing balls there at Notre Dame back in the day. But yeah, now he's here as the passing game specialist, also the tight ends coach. What a twist. Deuce Staley, after a rough go for a lot of the offensive coaching staff there in Carolina. He's back here in Cleveland, not returning, but he's now here in Cleveland as the running backs coach. Then you go to the defense. You got Brandon Lynch here, who's done a wonderful job as the cornerbacks coach. He's been the cornerbacks coach for the last 5 years. He has done a great job at helping develop and coach up some of these guys. So wanted to give him a good shout out there, but let's go ahead. Let's talk about this roster. Let's talk about the offense. And since we're talking the offense, the conversation has to begin with Deshaun Watson. Listen, I get it. His first year with the Browns, he was suspended for the first 11 games, but what you saw that year wasn't promising. Last year, granted, I think he was like 4-1, 5-1 as a starter, but it wasn't that much different from what we saw with Joe Flacco last year. They basically had the same turnover and big time throw rate. The adjusted completion percentage was very similar. The average depth of target, very similar. So it's like, at some point, you're going to be begging the question. You're going to be asking the question, when is Houston Texans Deshaun Watson going to show up in Cleveland? When is it? I don't know, man. We'll see. We'll see. I feel like we see flashes of it here and there, or at least we did last season. But it's discouraging considering how much you have given up, all the guaranteed money you gave him. It's a bit discouraging. I get it, Browns. I get it, Browns fans. Man, y'all been thirsty for a quarterback for a long time. You went out on a limb and you got real aggressive. You went out and got Deshaun Watson. And you know what? I didn't hate the move at the time. Mainly because rumors that Dolphins wanted to get him. And I was like, oh, please, man. Miss me with that. Please. But I don't know, man. We'll see this year. We'll see. What can we turn a corner on this? Can we get at least a little bit of what Watson was with the Houston Texans? Because it's not like Deshaun Watson. Oh, he's washed at this point. Like the man is what, 28 years old. It's got to still be there, right? It's still got to be there. Some people might have some problems with me listing Jerome Ford as a starter. I have that just because we don't know when Nick Chubb's coming back. It's a gruesome injury, knee injury he had. He has a history of knee issues dating back to Georgia. So I feel like the safer bet is like Jerome Ford's probably going to see a lot of the carries. I kind of talked a little bit already about Jerome Ford. I thought he did a solid job last year. He ended up, he was averaging under 4 yards per attempt, but 43 forced missed tackles. That missed tackle rate's actually not terrible. You had, I don't know, you kind of hoping for a little bit more. Yeah, yards after contact under 3 yards. So yeah, you're kind of hoping for more. Granted, there was some injuries along that offensive line, especially when you talk about the tackles. But Jerome Ford is going to have a little bit of help here. Let's go ahead and get into the backfield. Let's just talk about these guys real quick, because it's not like I think they bring a lot to the table. You got Nyheim Hines, who's coming off I can't remember if it was like a knee injury, ACL, something along those lines, where he missed all last season, but he brings return experience. But I feel like Jerome Ford, he's got that home run threat, that home run ability. So I don't know. If anything, is Deontay Foreman, who, okay, he's got that. He's a bit more of that bruiser. So I think it's going to be him and Ford that are kind of like rotating in there. They did acquire Pierre Strong from the Patriots last season. He's a bruiser. It's kind of his thing. So I think it's going to be fascinating to find out what the rotation is. They picked up Aiden Robbins, excuse me, as a UDFA. He was coming out of BYU, really good size, kind of a power back. So a lot of power backs actually here in Cleveland, along with John Kelly Jr. I've never been the biggest fan of John Kelly Jr. So I don't think he probably makes the team. But let's talk about the other playmakers in this roster. As you got Amari Cooper, man, coming off a hella good year, but might be his last year in Cleveland just because the contract is so expensive. But it was so good. It had over 1,300 yards last season. I'm included in the playoffs, so yeah. 5 tutties. And you didn't really get that type of production out of any of your other receivers. Sure, okay, yeah, David Njoku had a really good year last year. He sure did. They were like, hey, they paid me. I got to come out here and deliver. And he did. But Elijah Moore, not really doing it for me. And I feel like, I guess he can work on the outside. 53% of his snaps came on the outside, but he's hovering around that 8% drop rate. That kind of gets me queasy. And I really liked Elijah Moore coming out of Ole Miss. And after a strong rookie year with the Jets, I don't know. I don't know if he fell out of the graces there or something, but I just want to see them spread the ball a little bit more. I mean, he ended up having 600 yards, so I don't know, man. With the turnover they had at quarterback last year, I don't feel like it's. I can't put that on Elijah Moore, but them actively going out and getting Jerry Jeudy tells me that they're not completely satisfied with Elijah Moore. And you also got a Cedric Tillman who played a hell lot of snaps last year. Some people are going to probably try to tell me that's the Amari Cooper replacement. I don't think that's necessarily the case. I mean, I don't think that's untrue, but I do think that, well, they go out and get Jamari Thrash. They're probably looking to replace maybe even not just Elijah Moore, which I think they would have to pay him at the end of the season. I'm not aware of what his contract is, so just kind of speaking out loud here. But they're going to have to make a decision on if they want to pay him. And Amari Cooper, they're just going to probably try to get off that contract because they're right now real expensive because of Deshaun Watson. But I'll talk a little bit more about the depth at playmakers. Let's talk about this offensive line because it's hella good. I got him as a ranked A pass blocking unit. I got him as a ranked B run blocking unit. And honestly, a lot of that, probably Jedrick Wills, man. He's fine. He's probably if I'm going to be honest, he's their 5th best offensive lineman. He's just okay, and now you you're kind of at a standstill with that. It's okay, we saw good things from DeJuan Jones, but he's probably your right tackle of the future because Jack Conklin coming off the ACL injury. Sounds like he should be ready by training camp, and if not by training camp, by the season. And I hope no one forgets, Jack Conklin's kind of really good. So I imagine he's going to come back, but he's probably in the final year of his tenure here with Cleveland, just with how good DeJuan Jones was last season. But they're going to have to make a decision on Jedrick Wills. They just are. Again, to me, he is the 5th best offensive lineman here. But he's still he is solid. He is a solid player. And then you go to the interior. Of course, you got probably the best guard duo in the NFL of Wyatt Teller and Joe Bitonio. Ethan Posick came over here and just showed all that hey, I'm not just this athletic guy that's not going to hit his potential and his ceiling. That was kind of the problem with him in Seattle. He came over and was oh crap, Ethan Posick is here. Watch out. Had another solid season last year. That one of the best interiors in general in all of football. But let's talk about the depth because it's kind of a bit of an embarrassment of riches when it comes to this offensive line depth. Because, like, you are working with, you got Dewan Jones here, who can be a starter anywhere else. Like, he looked really good last season as a pass protector. Still coming together for him as a run blocker here in the NFL, but I think he was definitely one of the best, one of the top rookie tackles last season. When it comes to your depth at tackle, and particularly you got James Hudson, who did see 600 snaps last season. Very much looks like a developmental project, as he was coming out of Cincinnati. Very much looks like, hey, still kind of a work in progress. His time is not now. Hakeem Adeniji is a guy who splits time between guard and center. So, like, he just ends up being solid depth. You're hoping not to call upon him. Kind of curious. Like, I was a big fan of Jerron Christian. And I know, like, he wasn't, like, spectacular last season, but he's a guy that's had good football in him. I wonder how expensive it would have been to bring him back. But moving to the interior, Michael Dunn's been a very solid just depth player there. Played actually pretty solid football when you had injuries to you had Batonio, who had a knee injury. So you had to have Dunn step up, and he was pretty darn solid. He's probably the first guy in, and then you have Zach Zentner, who I talked a little bit about, a very good rookie there. I think he's going to be good for this scheme. I'm kind of shocked that Brian Allen is listed currently ahead on the depth chart of Luke Whippler. I really liked Whippler coming out of Ohio State. I think he fell because of medicals, but he's someone that I think that they were also trying to work out at guard. But, like, I don't have a lot of faith in Brian Allen. He had, like, one good year, and it happened to be his contract year, and then the Rams paid him, and that ended up being a mistake. He's also a guy that's kind of been often hurt during his career. I'm just not the biggest truther here. Jermaine Ifedi, been around the league what feels like a long time. I think he's a competent depth player at this juncture in his career. Javion Cohen, I'm interested in. He could potentially, I think, make this squad. Like, he ticks a lot of boxes when it comes to strength, movement skills, size, length, and whatnot. I was kind of shocked that he ended up being a UDFA. I thought he'd at least be a mid to late day 3 guy, but it is what it is. I think he might have an outside shot of maybe making this roster. Wyatt Davis was someone I really liked at Ohio State, got drafted in the 3rd round by the Giants, and just honestly never hit his potential. Guy's gifted. Maybe it clicks one of these years for him. But regardless, you have one of the best offensive lines in football, and the depth is pretty solid when you have guys like Dewan Jones, Michael Dunn, Zach Zentner, who, granted, Zach Zentner hasn't played yet in the NFL, but considering where you drafted him, you expect him to be good at least at some point. Even Jermaine Ifedi, like, you got solid players there on the interior. When it comes to the pass catching options, Jordan Atkins, he's gonna function as another receiving. I think he's receiving tight end, receiving option. I think he's gonna take Harrison Bryant's place in this offense, while Giovanni is gonna be a blocking tight end. They didn't really go out and get anything else at tight end. You got Zaire Mitchell-Patton, who in 2022 was coming out of Notre Dame College. Not the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, but Notre Dame College as a tight end prospect who, oh man, I can't even recall. It feels like 2022 draft was forever ago, but someone who had some interesting traits. But yeah, I thought they might have gone out and brought in another guy, but again, this is a team that it's kind of leaning more into those 3 wide receiver sets. So them actually being more active at receiver probably makes more sense. They add Jerry Jeudy. I think Jerry Jeudy is going to be really good for the Browns here. You got Amari Cooper there, Elijah Moore, still incredibly talented. Question is, Cedric Tillman, a guy who saw 600 snaps last season, how much time is he going to get worked into this offense? Nice big-bodied threat there. Jamari Thrash brings a little bit more speed. Honestly, probably a better slot option than David Bell. David Bell I think it just hasn't clicked for him in the NFL. Really liked him as like this after the catch type of guy, but honestly just doesn't have NFL speed. Michael Woods II will be serving, I think, a 6-game suspension for like PEDs or something. Don't quote me, just look it up yourself. You also got Jalen Darden, undersized vertical slot player. James Porsche, or Prochet, more of a special teamer at this juncture. Then they got a couple of freaks in Jalen Camp, who was a bit of just this athletic freak a couple of years ago, coming, I think, out of Georgia Tech. And then Matt Landers, who, again, another guy who tested pretty darn well and kind of shined at the Hula Bowl coming out of Arkansas there. So kind of interested. Maybe those guys can, I don't think they make the roster, but maybe they make some noise. I'm curious what receivers will get kept for the practice squad. And the $1 million question here is at quarterback, guys. It's at quarterback. You got Jameis Winston, Tyler Huntley going to be fighting out for quarterback 2 there. Regardless, you're going to have a really good emergency quarterback if you decide to stick with one of those guys on the roster. And then DTR is still here, a guy that they're just going to continue to develop. Kind of had a rough go at it last season, but let's go ahead and talk about this feared defense. And to no one's surprise, my grades for this defense are hella good, as I got an A- for coverage, A+ for pass rush, with their lone bad grade in run defense as a B-. But let's talk about this defense. Let's start with the defensive line, and the best player on the team, Myles Garrett, had 86 pressures, 15 sacks last season. This man is nigh impossible to take on one-on-one just because of the amount of speed and power he brings to the table. But he's not by himself. He's actually got a tandem on the other side, because it's not just Zadarius Smith. Zadarius Smith, I think the Browns are using really wisely. They're keeping him on a decent little bit of a pitch count. He had about almost 600 snaps last season. He was very productive, 60 pressures, 6 sacks. But you also got my boy Obo here, stuck as a rotation player. Someone the last couple of years I've been saying deserves to be a starter somewhere in the league. Stuck just as a super efficient rotation player, had 33 pressures along with 5 sacks. And you got one of the best defensive end rotations in the league. And then you get to the interior and you just got a lot of effective guys. Dalvin Tomlinson, nice space eater. They're at 320, 325, but he brings a bit of pass rush with him, which is a bit rare for those guys that are a bit on the heavier side. He had 36 pressures, 4 sacks last season. But then they really get into their bag when it comes to the defensive interior. Let me just read you off the snap splits here. As you had Tomlinson with 617 snaps, and then you go straight to Jordan Elliott, who had 440. Shelby Harris with 432. And then Maurice Hurst with 302. So they're going to be 4 guys deep. Like, these four guys are going to see a lot of the field. I got Shelby Harris as the next guy up. I think he's probably the best run defender of the bunch, or at least in my opinion. And then you're going to have guys like Maurice Hurst and Quentin Jefferson as your pass rushers. Don't sleep on Quentin Jefferson. I think he's going to get a healthy snap total. He's going to be in that 450 range. He had 29 pressures and 8 sacks last season. You look at the year before when he was with Seattle, 42 pressures, 6 sacks. The year before in Las Vegas, 46 pressures, 6 sacks. Yo, it don't matter where this cat goes. He's producing a very good year, mainly as a pass rusher. I think as a run defender, he's all right. He's fine. He's mid. But that's why you got Shelby Harris in tow there. And again, you got Maurice Hurst there, just as a very effective rotation player as a pass rusher. He was actually a pretty solid run defender last year as well, but he had 18 pressures, 2 sacks. So, like, this defensive line's a hella good, and we're just kind of scratching the surface with it. Let's just continue with the edge room real quick. You got Alex right there, someone who I really liked coming out of, I believe it was UAB, just hasn't developed how I was hoping he would. You got Isaiah McGuire, someone that Alex, Hail Mary Sports, loved coming out of Mizzou. Someone that they're just developing at this point. Sam Kamara played a few snaps for him last season. Was pretty effective as a pass rusher, but again, we're pulling from an exceptionally small sample size. And then you got Isaiah Thomas, former Oklahoma edge rusher. So they're trying to develop that next guy at the edge position. Keep in mind their edge 3 last year had close to 4, or their edge 4 last year had close to 400 snaps. So is Alex Wright going to hold on to the job there, or maybe does like an Isaiah McGuire ends up usurping him or whatnot? I think that could be fascinating. And then along the interior, I don't think Mike Hall is going to be that involved, at least early on. Siaki Ika, I'm not losing hope, but he's another guy that's a space eater that I guess you're kind of hoping can usurp Davlin Tomlinson someday. And I kind of like spoke my piece with Jawan Briggs. I don't think he's going to make the squad. I think he's going to end up being on the practice squad just because of the sheer amount of depth here. I'm kind of interested, will they keep Siaki Ika? Or will he maybe... there ain't no way they can let that guy go on practice squad, though. He's just so big. But he's not going to see the playing time. Kind of is what it is. I mean, hey, again, an embarrassment of riches here. And then let's talk about the linebackers. You got Jordan Hicks stepping up here. Jordan Hicks had a solid year last season for the Minnesota Vikings. And, I mean, at this juncture, like, he's just a solid player, man. He was good with the Eagles, good with the Cardinals, good with the Vikings. He's just a solid linebacker. Goes out and he does his job. He's a very sure tackler. Keeps, for the most part, during his career, his missed tackle rate's been under 10%. He's just, I don't really think he's gonna offer you much in coverage. Like, he was all right last year in coverage. Like, his completion rate is about average for the linebacker position, and he had a few pass breakups here and there, but that's okay. That's fine. You're getting stability at the line at your Mike position, and you're okay with that because freaking JOK is a freaking monster. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah is just freaking insane. Had 16 pressures last season, 4 sacks. When it comes to what he did in coverage, 2 interceptions, 2 pass breakups. He did occasionally line up a lot in the slot, so his completion rate is a little up there, but it's not like they target him a ton. But you just love what he does as a penetrator, as that guy that is just this constant disruptor. So, like, man, I love JOK. I'm a huge fan of JOK. You got Devin Bush, who I feel like that's just kind of what they already got JOK there for. But they're listing him here as the Sam. You got Nathaniel Watson as the rookie. Doubt he'll see playing time even if injury hits. I feel like they'll probably rely on one of these guys that have been around a little bit longer, and like Tony Fields, who was formerly of like West Virginia and Arizona. Maybe even you got Mo Diabate. Feel like they'll probably lean on one of those guys if injury hits. Well, probably Devin Bush would be the first guy to come in, because I mean, this is a team that's probably going to be in a sub package most of the time. Like, that's just the NFL nowadays. You're living in nickel and dime. Like, if you go to look at their linebacker splits last season, the linebacker 3, which was Tony Fields, by the way, played all of 234 snaps, opposed to you have like Komora, JOK playing 756. You got Taki playing 563. So yeah, I mean, that's just gonna be the case. That's just what's gonna happen, is what it is. But it's a good linebacker core. It's a steady linebacker core that has a little bit of pizzazz because of what they bring, or at least what JOK brings as a pass rusher. And then you look at the secondary, one of the best secondaries in the NFL. You got Martin Emerson here, kind of emerging last season with 4 interceptions, 9 pass breakups, a completion rate of 47.1%. Don't sleep on the guy. He's hella good. And then you have Denzel Ward, which, hey, fun fact, some people were like, oh man, he's not as good as he used to be. Dude allowed a completion rate of 51.5%. Had 9 pass breakups, 2 interceptions. Man allows 3 touchdowns. All of last season, suddenly people think, well, not what he used to be. Nah, still hella good. Greg Newsome, real good. 10 pass breakups, 2 interceptions. He's doing this inside the slot. 58.2% completion rate, and he's doing this in the slot. To be fair, he does split time between the slot and the outside because, hey, they can do that. They can get away with that. And then you look at the depth at corner, like Cameron Mitchell, like low key. He kind of got some playing time last year. Him and Newsome actually both coming from Northwestern, but Mitchell was fairly decent in the slot last season. Did allow a completion rate of 75.9%, but 2 pass breakups, that's solid. That's fine. That's okay. So, guy that they're developing, I'm not worried. You're worried. But you do look at the depth, and you're kind of like, okay, well, if injury hits, who steps up there at the corner position? As you got like a Khalif, not even going to try to butcher his last name, former corner out of Western Kentucky. I mean, this guy's going into year 2. You got Justin Hardy, who's just more of a special teamer. It's probably going to be Cameron Mitchell. That's going to be the guy they have to rely on. Like Tony Brown's just a special teamer. Like Miles Harden, he's got that flexibility to play outside in the slot. So like, yeah, maybe there's a little concern. Like Cameron Mitchell, can he step up to the plate if injury does occur? Maybe I have some hesitancies. Maybe I got some hesitancies when it comes to that. Low key, you got a really good safety group here. Like low key, Juan Thornhill, I think, is one of the more underrated safeties in the NFL. He was slowed a little bit by a calf injury last year, but Grant Delpit started to emerge. Like, heck yeah. He had a groin injury that kept him out a few games last season. But you had Rodney McLeod, who's a very good backup in the NFL, played good football last season. You had DeAnthony Bell, who stepped up and played a hella good, ended up having 3 pass breakups, 2 interceptions. Hello, mamma mia. I like it. I like it a lot. Yeah, Ricky Hickman Jr. make some like big plays last season. Like, hold the phone. Is this just a safety friendly scheme? Like, how are they not going to hold on to all 5 of these safeties? Questions that I have. Like, the safety group's actually that good here. How are they going to? And then you got like Chris Edmonds, who I believe was coming out of Arizona State. Wasn't like really in love with him. Brady Breeze, coming out of Oregon, just kind of felt like he was really just a special teamer in the league. That's how he's going to be able to hold on to a roster spot. But no, the safety group's too good. They got to keep 5, right? Like, this defense is just hella good. At the end of the day, you just look at it and be like, yeah, I could see this defense when the offense is slow going or they have some hiccups. Yeah, no, I think this defense could carry them. It could keep them in the game. Keep them in the game long enough for the offense to figure it out. But with that being said, let's go ahead. Let's talk about their schedule in 2024. The Browns finished 11-6 last year, despite having the 5th hardest schedule and probably the worst injury luck in the entire NFL. And unfortunately, one of those things aren't going to change in 2024, as I have the Browns having the 3rd toughest schedule. So let's go ahead and get into it with the game by game and try to figure out this team's ceiling, which could be a little bit difficult because, well, what Deshaun Watson are we going to get, and are we ever going to get it consistently? So they're going to open the year against the Dallas Cowboys. They got that one at home. I think they got that one in the bag. Say they come out strong. They come out swinging. Dan Quinn ain't there anymore. Maybe the defense won't be that scary. Regardless, they go to Jacksonville the following week. And I'm not going to lie to y'all, I don't think this is that scary of a schedule to open the year. I think it's plausible that they start the year 5-0. I think that's within reason. You got the Eagles in Philadelphia. Eagles coming off a bye. I think that's fair to say. Okay, maybe they don't win that one. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to have them split in the AFC North because, hey, that's the AFC North. They just kill one another. And then let's give them a win over the Chargers. Chargers are kind of in the midst of a rebuild. First year under Jim Harbaugh. You come out of your bye having to face the Saints. The Saints are super inconsistent. I just talked about them just a couple of days ago. That they're a team that's like, oh, they can be good or they can be very mediocre. I'm going to go ahead and have y'all split in with the AFC North teams. I'll give y'all a win over the Broncos. Sean Payton, you got a rookie quarterback. You're still in a bit of a rebuild there. And then, okay, let's say some of these tough ones. Maybe Kansas City gets that win. Let's say the Dolphins. Do I have faith in the Dolphins? Probably not. That's down the stretch too. But we're looking at the ceiling of this team, and I got 12 wins. And I think that's fair. 12 wins as the potential ceiling for this squad. That's with y'all splitting the AFC North. I don't think it's going to come that easy, though, unfortunately. I just don't. I don't know what Deshaun Watson to expect. And I think that's probably because we're going to get some peaks and some valleys, unfortunately. I think it's going to be inconsistent. I think with the tougher schedule, and even if you do have better injury luck, I think it'll be a tough go to try to match 11 wins. I really do. And you'd be like, well, we were so hurt last year. It's like, yeah, but you had a lot of guys step up and work out really well. Joe Flacco, literally comeback player of the year last year. You had DeJuan Jones play really well when you had Jack Conklin go down. You had those safeties when you had injuries come abound. You had Bell, you had McLeod step up and play well. Hickman, step up, play well. You had guys step up and play well. Is that to be expected all the time? I don't think so, even if you do have some misfortune with injury. So I do have y'all a little bit lower than 11. Just a couple of games lower, so fear not. Like going back through the schedule, yeah, I think y'all could be the Dolphins. I really do. I'm not changing that one. I don't know. At the end of the day, I ended up settling on 9-8 for for the Browns projection, just because I feel like offensively this team could be such a wild card, and I don't know really what to do with that. I do think you're in that 9, 10, 11. Like, I think that's going to be the range. Like, any higher, and it's be like, okay, well, Deshaun Watson found it. Any lower, and it's be like, okay, this team got hurt, and unfortunately, it just made them a worse team. I just, you're not always going to get lucky, and Joe Flacco is going to fall in your lap. It's just not going to happen. So 9-8, I think that's fair. Could be lowballing it, but hey, that's what happens when you project these. When you project the season for every NFL team, you're gonna have the ceilings of some teams and the floors of others. You're gonna be lower on some teams than others. It's just it's just what it is. But hey, I've already done the Steelers deep dive. If you want to go ahead and check that out, see how your division rivals stack up to y'all, or you can check out some of my summer deep dive into the 2025 NFL draft class. Those videos are down there if you want to check them out. But as always, until next time, you be easy, my friends. Later.